PT838, Week 3, Results section. Please see the assignment instructions in the learning module for a complete list of what must be included in this section. This lecture will focus on a few key points to help you in your analysis of the articles. A reminder that this section should be written in formal writing style, third person, past tense, and comply with APA format. There are several types of PICO projects that can be done for the terminal project. They include intervention studies, which compare two interventions or an intervention with a control group. It can be a prognostic factor or a diagnostic test. In the results section, you'll be analyzing each article individually. Questions to be answered in the section include: why was this article chosen? Examples are: it answered the PICO question, it matched the study population, or it examined the intervention, prognostic indicator, or diagnostic testing question. State what the purpose of the study was. Give the conclusions of the study that the authors had, and then analyze each article on your own. And finally, give a level of evidence on the CE-BM scale. When you're analyzing each article, you want to consider things like the validity of the research. You want to discuss any bias that may be in the study, including biases the authors may not have listed. Examine the statistical measures and their findings. And finally, what did the authors find? Do you agree with them? Do your own analysis of each article. Don't just restate what each author said about the research. Statistical measures. For each study, examine the statistical measures used. Were those measures appropriate for the study design? Was the author's analysis accurate? State what the p-values, confidence intervals, numbers needed to treat, etc. were. And were the findings significant statistically? The following is a review of the analysis of each specific type of study. This will be a brief review with bullet points. This material should already be well known and understood from previous classes and experiences. For more extensive or detailed information, please review your Joule text. So when appraising the evidence of studies of intervention, you want to determine the validity of the study. The way this is done is by asking the following questions. This is by no means a comprehensive list of questions you can ask, but it's the typical bullet points. First is the subject assignment or allocation. Was this random? How was it randomized? Is that randomization appropriate for the study? Was there any subject attrition? What biases might have been in the study, including investigator biases? Was there construct validity to the study? If you don't remember what construct validity means, there's quite a good and lengthy discussion of it in the Joule text. Describe the study design. Describe any instrumentation and equipment used and how this might have impacted the findings of the study. And finally, look at any outcomes measures they may have used. When looking at studies of intervention, examine whether there was external validity, which is the ability to generalize or apply to the general population, and was there internal validity? Internal validity means the outcome can be attributed to the studied intervention and not to extraneous factors or to the placebo effect. Was there blinding and concealment of both subjects and investigators, just subjects, just investigators, or none? What was the effect of the placebo effect, or did this exist in your specific study? And finally, what was the statistical power? Was it strong enough to support the intervention or reject it? Next, we're going to look at appraising the evidence of diagnostic tests. Typically, a diagnostic test is compared to a gold standard test. Questions to ask are, were all the subjects in the study given the same tests, both the gold standard and the test being examined? Was there blinding of assessors and of patients or subjects? Were subjects with all stages of the condition being evaluated? And was this stage early on or later in the course of the disease process? And finally, was there a confirmation study done with a different set of subjects? This last requirement is actually very rarely going to be seen in any of the research that you may be looking at, because these are often the first study done by these authors. Other things to consider when examining a diagnostic test is the reliability of the test. And what statistics did they use? Common statistics for this type of study include the standard error of measurement, the Pearson's product moment correlation, Spearman's rho, kappa, and interclass correlation coefficient. Again, please review the Joule text or your statistics text for more information on these measures and how to assess them. With diagnostic tests, another key point is validity. There are two types of validity with diagnostic tests. The first one is face validity, which basically means does the instrument appear to measure what it's designed to? And then there's statistical validity. Does the statistical analysis show the validity of the test? A test may have face validity, but statistically be found to be invalid. Does the test have sensitivity? Meaning, does this test correctly identify true positives? And does it have specificity? Does a test correctly identify true negatives? The best tests have excellent sensitivity and specificity, but this is, of course, uncommon in actual practice. Finally, look at the statistical measures used in the study. Some common ones are receiver operating characteristic curves or ROC curves, positive and negative predictive values, likelihood ratios, and CIs. Another type of study is a prognostic or risk factor study. These are predictions of the risk of developing a problem in the future, the outcome of an impairment or functional disability, or the results of a physical therapy intervention. When appraising the study credibility of that of a prognostic factor, there are some things you want to look at. Do they have a defined sample? Are all the subjects in their sample representative of the population being studied? Are the subjects all in the same stage of the disease or condition? Is the time frame of the study long enough to capture the outcome? And is the data collected from all subjects in the study? Other things to consider: were the outcome criteria clearly defined? Was there assessor blinding or masking? Were there subgroups within the sample? And was there a statistical adjustment for this if there was? And finally, was there a confirmation study with a new set of subjects? Again, this is going to be unusual, but good studies may have that. You may also be looking at a study that's a confirmation of a study done previously, either by the same authors or other authors. When looking at study credibility generally, there are some other considerations. One is there a potential risk of pain or injury with the intervention or the test? This is often expressed in the relative risk ratio statistic. What is the number needed to treat for the intervention? How many people receive the intervention before one will benefit? This is another statistical measure commonly used in intervention trials. Is there a significant benefit from knowing the result of the test or measure? Is there a scientific value to the test or measure, or is the cost of the intervention or test justified? The test may be a good test, but the cost of it may outweigh the benefit of knowing the outcome being looked at. There are some tools for the appraisal of the evidence available to you in your Jewel text. The one I'm using happens to be the second edition from 2011, so these page numbers may not be correct for later editions. For diagnostic tests, you want to look at tables 10.3 and 10.4 in the Jewel text, and in the 2011 second edition, those are page 247 through 251. For prognostic or risk factor studies, it's table 11.3, which is page 267 and 68. And for appraisal of interventions is table 12-4, and that's page 291 through 295. For all studies, regardless of design, you want to state what the Oxford Center for Evidence-Based Medicine level of evidence is. This may be reported by the authors or it may not. If it is reported by the authors, do you agree with them? Either way, you should analyze this yourself using the scale of evidence. Don't just accept what the authors give. Another level of evidence is the Pedro scale. This is for controlled trials. If your article was published on Pedro, it will have a score already assigned to it if it's a controlled trial. If your study was not listed under Pedro and doesn't have its own score, you can assign one. If there is a score assigned, you should double check the work of the author and see if you agree with them on the score assigned. You may find that often there is some disagreement. The Pedro scale is not a requirement for this paper, but it does add to your analysis and it could score extra points during grading. This is the Pedro scale taken from their website, which the URL is there, and this lists the 11 criteria. All points are awarded when a criteria is clearly satisfied. If it's vague of whether that criteria is satisfied or not, then you don't assign the points. For more on how to apply the Pedro scale, please go to their website as they do have a tutorial on this as well. If you have any questions or you need help, feel free to contact me through the course messages, or if you need an answer quicker than that, you can always text me.